While most of us love the fantastic action platformer Bleed 2, every game has its strongest parts. In this video I will rank all levels in Bleed 2, so get yourself ready for this video where I go through my top 7 list of Bleed 2 levels. Before we start this list, I want to make a small disclaimer. There is not a single bad level in this game in my opinion. The reason why your favorite level might be on the lower parts of this list isn't by necessity because I find it bad, but because I enjoy other levels more. This list has no bad entries. This is a list full of wonderful stages, and each and every stage on this list could have made it to the number 1 spot in most games. But in a game full of fantastic level design, the competition is rough. Another warning is that this list will contain some story spoiler elements. So if you have not played this game and does not want any spoilers, I do recommend you to play through Bleed 2 right now. It's a relatively short game, and return to watch this video once done. With that said, let us start the countdown. On spot number 7 we find the Chase. The Chase hosts to one of Bleed 2's very best bosses, Red Sprite, who is always a blast to fight against, literally. Red Sprite really makes good use of Bleed 2's reflect mechanics and shoots out plenty of purple and yellow big bullets for you to reflect back at her for major damage, all while flying around surrounded by enemies ready to force you to move out of their way, all while reflecting said big bullets. She is a strong start to the level after getting to her through one long all-scroll section. With a start like that, what makes it so that this level will reach the bottom of this list? Well, there is another auto-scroller after this, followed by a boss, then yet another long auto-scroller, and then finally the final boss of the level. While the second boss Ninja is slightly annoying, especially until you figure out you can hurt him with the katana at a certain distance, and are forced to wait for him to make their move during the second phase, the sole reason why this level is on the number 7 spot of this list is because it is all-scroller after all-scroller after all-scroller. Auto-scrolls in video games are tolerable, sometimes even pretty fun, to a certain level. But they are never great. In Bleed 2, the platforming movement in itself is so phenomenal that any sort of forced auto-scroller feels bad, as you get the feeling that if only you could perform some platforming instead of this part, it would be so much more fun. As mentioned in the introduction, this is by no means a bad level. Both Red Sprite and the final boss, Vex Rocket, who has extremely interesting battle mechanic of shooting rockets you have to jump on and use as platform, and is probably one of the more unique and interesting boss fights in the entire game, are wonderful. But one level has to have the last place on the list, and while it makes me sad to put the level with both Red Sprite and Vex Rocket spot, the amount of stale auto-scrollers on this level really punishes it and is enough to make it the least good of the best. At spot number 6 we find the Showdown. The Showdown is, from an area perspective, the smallest level of the entire game. It's literally just one little screen. And it's composed of a 4-phase boss fight against the main antagonist of her story, Valentine. It has cool retro references, the most hilarious being the Pokemon-like text that appears whenever someone uses Taunt and it says if it's super effective or not very effective. The health bars and the super punch-out style countdown adds further flair to this level. Throughout the fight, we get to go through the final confrontation with Valentine and her crowd of your enemies, which she used in different ways from face to face, with the help of her telekinesis, to attack you in different ways. Throughout the fight, the crowd slowly but surely, after Valentine's abuse of them, starts to turn on her, and finally during the 4th phase, the crowd is even on your side and helps you out to deliver the final blows to Valentine. It is a satisfying 4-stage boss fight that really highlights the personality of Bleed 2 as a quirky over-the-top game. It is such a blast of a boss fight that it in itself tells a story. However, that is all there is to this level. The Showdown has a very entertaining and thematic boss fight, but it completely lacks platforming elements, which subtracts a bit from the level. It is not a level I would want removed from a game though, but it feels like an additional part of the level before it, rather than its own level. But as a climax to the story of the game, the Showdown makes absolute sense and it is beautifully executed. We do now enter the top 5 and we start off with the highway, and oh my, what a way to get to the top 5. The highway stars the absolute best of the platforming of Bleed 2. having several tense and interesting platforming sections that can really let the player explore the fantastic platforming controls of Bleed 2. The absolute highlight being the tunnel between the first and second bosses of the level that feels so satisfying to dash through. While the platforming is strong in this level, it sadly is a little lacking in the boss department. While the previous two entries had great bosses but no platforming, the highway has the opposite problem. While there are boss fights in the highway, the bosses of this level are not exactly the best Bleed 2 has to offer. The first boss, the Kitty Shopper, is probably the highlight of this course. It is a throwback to Bleed and looks so ridiculously cute in Bleed 2, highlighting the difference in the art direction between the two games. While Bleed was far grittier, Bleed 2 has a very bright feel to it. And the cat-shaped helicopter really hits that point home. But the fight has by this game's standard pretty stale mechanics. It's not borne by enemies, but it doesn't carry the boss weight of this level in the way it would need to, considering that this stage is weighted down so much by having two of the worst bosses in the game. After the Great Tunnel, players are met with the Semi-Core, who is a truck that shoots missiles and lasers at you, having to dodge them while delivering damage to the truck. It is a fun fight, but nothing special by the standards of Bleed 2. I can feel a little stale as the fight is slightly too easy even on the higher difficulty levels. It is however a good boss fight, which is sadly more can be said about the last boss of this level, which has our first meeting with Valentine. This shove against Valentine really doesn't set him up as a threatening villain. This is probably the boss fight of Bleed 2 that the fewest people will have a problem with, but the people will still find the most annoying. The reason for this is because of the flow of the battle and the ease of avoiding damage, while still having weirdly punishing mechanics. The main drill of this fight is that Valentine is protected by a power barrier, and that you, by succeeding with the mechanics percent, will destroy the barrier and get free access to start damage her. If you fail though, you might get hit of damage, but the main punishing mechanic in this fight is the fact you will have to wait for several seconds to get another go of one of her mechanics, and will spend a lot of time staring at her floating around over your head. While tension and some level of punishing mechanics are always great in action games, there are good ways and bad ways to punish a player. Having them take damage is good, generally speaking. Having them sit and wait for several seconds is probably not the best way to punish a player. To add to this fight can be made free by using the rocket launcher, which can be used to destroy Valentine's barrier, making the fight even harder to die at. And very free to clear, very quickly. You are welcome for the help. On spot number 4 we find the Warship. The Warship is probably the hardest level in the game, especially in arcade mode. The level starts off with some punishing platforming, during which it is easy to take some hits, followed by the very unforgiving segment slider, who attacks in a similar manner to the famous Yellow Devil, only that it covers most of the screen, sometimes shooting out platforms leaving little bit of slice to get through. It is an interesting boss fight that forces you to use both your aiming and platforming skills to their fullest. And after that you just keep going. The rest of the bosses are not an knees at either, as the upcoming boss takes place in a zero gravity section, which leads to some very interesting gameplay during this 2-stage boss fight. Both of these phases really utilize the zero gravity in different ways to give the game some very interesting new gameplay elements. Stage 1 plays an awful lot like a shoot 'em up in the most wonderful way. And it makes me wonder what a game like this would be like if it only had shoot 'em up gameplay. It would probably be an amazing game. The second boss fight is once again one of those really punishing, annoying fights that can either be almost completely skipped with the help of rocket launcher, or leave you with a very punishing waiting section. After all of this waits Bleed 2's hardest and most punishing platforming section that feels so very fun to play through, but oh so frustrating at times. It is an entire section filled with purple bubbles that falls down through a roof that the brain has to navigate through, leaving this a level with very punishing bosses at the platforming. The only star part is the final boss after this platforming, which is Anti-Battalion. This boss is a very interesting boss that has a lot of fun mechanics to him, but the boss is so varied in how easy or hard it is, and it is completely up to chance how easy or hard this boss is going to be, more so than any other boss. One thing is starting the Warship though. The player will be challenged on all fronts Bleed 2 can challenge the player from throughout the entire level, making me feel very confident in putting it on the number 4 spot of this list. On the bronze medal position, we find the launch. The launch is a masterclass in how to add optional challenge to a game. The launch has several parts of the level that can either be seen as very hard or relatively easy, depending on if you are speedrunning, playing through the game casually, or deciding to handle some parts of the level in a rougher way or not. The two parts in question are the auto-scroller at the second boss and the mechanics of the third boss in the 4 boss gauntlet found at the very end of the level. The auto-scroller in the level has a very interesting mechanic to it, where it's pretty intensive platforming section that goes faster and faster and faster until the player gets hit by something, in which case it slows down. It is such a wonderful way to deal with a potentially difficult segment, but that it still makes it more difficult for those who crave difficulty, which is often speedrunners and score hunters, who will be severely punished while getting hit, while also allowing this section to be relatively easy for casual players. RoboWhite operates in a similar way. The core mechanic of the boss is that it has a shield that spins around itself that protects it from most sorts of incoming damage, that once again can be ignored with the help of the rocket launcher. If you play on new game, you can also wait for the boss to launch its barrier and either reflect it back or simply ignore it and go at the boss while it descends towards it. However, there is one final strategy that brave players and speedrunners in particular might take, and that is to either spin around with the boss to shoot at the little window it has exposed, or use katana flare to get through it. Both of these strategies are hard and pretty risky to perform, and when done with these strategies, RoboWhite, who casually is a relatively simple boss, becomes one of the by far hardest bosses of the entire game. This kind of optional difficulty that is still for people who does different kinds of challenge runs, the optimal way to reach the goal, is such a genius game design choice, while still making the game beatable for people looking for a more reasonable challenge. To further add to this, RoboWhite is in the middle of a boss gauntlet, which means that the player is neither probably at full health or done after the fight of this boss, which adds further risk to picking the harder strategy in arcade runs. I know I talked a lot about optional difficulty and how to implement it here, but this is truly the fact that elevated the launch to the bronze medal place. While the rest of the bosses in this level are mostly good, very few of them are outstanding, and the rest of the platforming does not really justify anything about the Warship, but this masterclass in game design shows such elegance and competence in level design that it's very hard to justify putting it any lower on the list. On spot number 2 of this list, we find Assault. As a first level of a game, a lot is expected and a lot of pressure is put on it to both capture the interest of the player and to teach them the important core mechanics of the game, and Assault does succeed with both of these remarkably. The Assault hosts some good platforming segments and starts off with 2 very easy bosses in name only, which are designed to teach the player 2 of Ruin's most powerful defensive options for survival, the katana reflective bullets and slow motion, in very safe and easy boss fights before it goes straight to actual bosses. The Assault is maybe not the flashiest level of Bleed 2, but it does perfectly show off everything Bleed 2 has to offer while teaching the core mechanics of the game. The 2 actual bosses of the level are also showing off the 2 ways bosses are usually handled in this game. Either are a more traditional boss fight, or they are a more action-based boss fight, where the background is moving and that can sometimes pose interesting obstacles or mechanics due to it, even though the example in the first level does not do so. This gives the player all the tools to handle the rest of the game, while not exactly going really boring even as an experienced player, which makes it a wonderful first level. And as such, it really can't deserve anything less than second place for accomplishing this much at once. At the gold medal spot, we find the final level of the game, Epilogue. Just like with the first level of a game, the final level of a game does also have a lot of pressure put on it to deliver. But what the final level is meant to deliver is highly different from the first level. The final level of a game has to deliver a closure and a good challenge, and Bleed 2 did the former in a very interesting way by a throwback to the first game in the franchise, Bleed. I am not going to spoil the events of that game here more than Bleed 2 does, but Bryn's rival, cleverly named Rival, is upset because Bryn got all of the glory for the defeat of Valentine, once again robbing him of, in his opinion, his achievements. The rival is a really fun and interesting foil to Bryn's victory here, as everyone can relate to having that one person around them who wants to claim more than their fair share of praise for something you did the lion's share part of. So for this final level, Rival wants to settle once and for all who the true hero is, and the winner will be seen as the greatest hero of all time. Bryn accepts his bet on one condition, which even though I warned about no spoilers before, do absolutely not want to spoil for anyone who has not played the game yet. And so the final level starts with extremely high stakes on the line. The entirety of the course is filled to the brim with some of the best and most varied boss designs Bleed 2 has to offer. There are almost all Rivals machines, and each and every one of them plays extremely differently. It is as if the designer put all the ideas for interesting boss concepts that they could not fit into the main game into one single level. The highlights are return to zero gravity gameplay, when Bryn has to fight a boss while falling off a tall building, the crawling core, which Bryn has to fight while being chased by it and digging through the ground, giving a level that is really nothing but a boost rush, a very good platforming segment, and finally the finale against Rival himself. The Rival fight is probably the absolute highlight of mechanics this game has to offer, as the Rival has a lot of clever and varied mechanics that all make sense for him, and are almost all abilities Bryn herself also has. While he does suffer a bit from the same problem that Antipalion did, that his fight can either be easy or very much harder depending on what luck you have, the length of Rival's health bar ensures that no fight against him ever becomes truly too easy, which makes it so that variety in mechanics enriches the fight rather than making some wins feel too easy compared to other attempts at the same fight. All of this is wrapped up in a wonderful action-packed gameplay narrative that keeps the high pace up throughout the entire level. It is a perfect closing act to our action-packed game, and does leave the player wishing for more, which is a true testament to how strong of a final level it is. We are not done with the list. What are your thoughts on the list, and how would you rank the levels? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and feel free to tell everyone how you would have ranked the levels yourself. Also feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and also feel free to press the cute subscribe button for more gaming related videos and speedrunning content in the future. If you want to chat with me live or just want to chill out and watch me play some games, feel free to follow me on Twitch, where I stream most Monday, Wednesday, Thursday and Sunday evenings. Also, if you're interested in what weapons would be used to tackle these 7 amazing levels, feel free to look up my top 7 list of the most useful weapons in Bleed 2. Until next time, plenty of hugs and stay cute.